Hey there, I'm Jane Sawyer, and this is Jane Sawyer Makes a Little Pumpkin House and a Witchy Toad. Previously, I showed you 3 easy ways to DIY a paper mache pumpkin. We turned the first pumpkin into the jack-o'-lantern and the second pumpkin into this cute little pumpkin basket. If you haven't seen those projects, the links to those videos are in the description. Finally, we have this third pumpkin and we are going to turn that into a mini pumpkin house. I'm going to show you how to cut a door, how to DIY a hinge with some scrap wire, and we're even going to make a little guy to live inside. It's going to be great.
Let's do it.
First, let's recap how we made this particular pumpkin. I started with a plastic bag and I stuffed that with some polyester fiber fill. I secured the top with an elastic and made a pumpkin stem in the process. I taped up the bottom corners to improve the shape a little bit. Then I used more rubber bands to divide the pumpkin into segments. I had a bit of trouble getting my paper mache to stick to the particular plastic of this pumpkin, so I did a layer of glue-soaked paper towel and let that dry. Then I put on about 5 layers of my regular paper mache. Now we're going to carve a little door in the front. You can carve this pumpkin just like you would a living gourd. You can use a serrated steak knife to cut through the paper mache. The little teeth on the knife are great for sawing through the layers of paper. If you want a bit more surgical precision, a pen knife with a fresh blade is a good option too. Once you've cut around, the door will pop right off. And now we can snip a little hole in the plastic and pull out all this stuffing. This stuff is still good. It's nice and clean because it's been locked inside the bag, so I'm definitely saving this for another project. And then, I don't know why I didn't film this, but it's really easy to pull out the plastic bag. You just reach in there and peel it away from the paper mache. It should come out pretty easily. Here's the little pumpkin after the bag has been removed, and the little pumpkin door. I like to cover the cut edge of the door opening with a little bit of paper mache. I do the same to the door. And then, since I've got the paper mache stuff out anyways, I fold up some little triangles of paper and arrange them around the stem to add a little bit of detail. My little pumpkin here needs a floor. Off camera, I cut some foam board to fit in there. I obviously had to cut it into 2 pieces to fit through the opening. I just kind of smushed it in there. It's basically friction holding it in place, and it's not quite level, but this is a pumpkin house, not fine woodworking after all. Off camera, I paper mache'd over the floor and I added in some light. Okay, this was impossible to film, but I just want to tell you what I did. So after I put the floor in here, move some light over. After I put the floor in, I cut a little slot for this battery pack to fit between the bottom of the pumpkin and the floor in that void space. And then there's a little hole. Turn these on, will you be able to see it? So there's a little hole here through the floor that the wire comes up, and then I bundled the fairy lights all together and kind of bent them in a shape that's gonna fit into the top of the pumpkin. So that's the floor, and then this is the roof. The lights are gonna sit up here, and I want to hide these with a ceiling. So I'm going to take this plastic container and cut out a circle. I'm going to scrunch up some blue tissue paper. This will give my lights an eerie blue glow. I'm gluing that around the plastic circle and then cutting off the excess. Now we can shove this into the ceiling of our little pumpkin house. Now I want to make a little hinge for the door of our house. I'm using this 20 gauge galvanized wire from the hardware store. I'm going to bend one end into a little spiral, and then I'm going to cut it off a bit longer than I want my finished hinge to be. You can see my fingers positioned right where I think the end of my hinge post will be. Now I'm going to make the second part of the hinge. I want it to match, so I'm making a little spiral here. Next, I'm going to make a coil of wire by wrapping it like so around this pin tool. This bit is a bit fiddly. A quick fit check, and then I can trim the wire and make another spiral here. Now I can slide my straight bit into the coil and bend the decorative spiral in the end. And this will sit on our pumpkin just like this. I'll also use this wire to bend a little handle for the door. And then I attach them. Alrighty, let's paint this thing. We're starting with some gesso as a primer. If you don't have any gesso, check out my dry brush painting video for a recipe to make your own. The pumpkin gets a base coat of orange craft paint. The stem gets a base coat of green. I taped off the stem so I could do a bit of wet blending detail. I think this looks a little better. I tinted my gesso light blue and primed the interior walls. When that was dry, I finished with a coat of dark blue. I painted the floor in a light tan color. I have this star punch that I got from the dollar store. I'm using it to cut some stars out of this fancy paper. I randomly placed some little dots of glue and then stuck a scattering of stars on the walls of my house. So cute! With the interior decorated, I can now hang the door. The pumpkin was looking a little bit boring here, so I wet blended some yellow and brown for a more interesting paint scheme. So our little pumpkin house is done, but I think we need to make a little guy to live in here. Let's make a little toad witch. I'm going to be using some Super Sculpty to make this gal today. But first we're going to bulk out the body with some aluminum foil. I'm just doing my best to start with a foil ball that is vaguely toad shaped. I do this by consulting lots of reference images. If you want to see my reference images, I have a Pinterest board for them all. I'll leave a link to that in the description. I like to share my references this way rather than just flash them on the screen because I think it's important that you can click through and find the original source if you wanna. Like I said, there's a link to the Pinterest board in the description of this video, or you can search for me over there. I'm at Jane Sawyer Makes on Pinterest too. I use some coils or snakes or whatever you want to call them to make some toad lips, and then I blend them into the body. To make her pronounced toad eyes, I cut a small ball of clay in half and then place the halves atop her little toad head. Those got blended in a little bit. And then I had these small glass cabochons. I pushed them in there to make some eyeballs. Her back feet are some little sausages of clay. Again, I looked at my reference images to see what a toad foot looks like. And then her leg is just a bigger sausage bent into a toad leg shape. I pushed the leg onto the foot, did a tiny bit of blending, and then stuck them onto the toad. I decided her toes were a little long, so I gave them a trim and softened the ends. His front legs are short little sausages with a bit of a bend in them. And his front feet were made much the same as the back. Again, I smushed the end of the arm onto the foot and stuck that onto my toad. I wanted to give my toad a bumpy, toadish texture, but I wasn't about to individually sculpt all kinds of bumps, so I made myself a little texture tool. I started with a small wad of clay and made some impressions with some round tools. After baking the wad of clay, I used a rocking motion to impress some bumps onto my toad. I think this was pretty effective. I just wish I had given my texture tool a longer handle. I baked the toad until he was good and firm, and then I used a needle tool to pop out the glass cabochons. And then I gave her a brown toad paint scheme. When the paint was dry, my plan was to pop the cabochons back in, but I didn't really like how that looked, so I made the eyes glossy with a drop of UV resin. If you don't want to use resin, a polymer-safe glossy top coat will work just as well. The Toad Witch needs a broom. This one started as a toothpick that I roughened by carving into it with a craft knife. The handle got some brown paint, and then the bristles were made with a little bit of frayed rope. Lastly, I sewed together a little felt hat for my tiny toad. And there you have it, a paper mache pumpkin house dwelling for a witchy little toad. In the end, I wish I had made this pumpkin a bit bigger. I think it would have been really cool to add some more details to the interior, like maybe a little kitchen where our toad can cook his flies. If you think that's a good idea, leave a fly emoji in the comments. Please give me a like on this video if you think I did a good job. Likes make my freaking day, and they also help this video get pushed to more people. And more people is great. The ad revenue I earned last month from folks watching my video is helping me buy groceries for my family. So I super appreciate it. Subscribe to my channel if you're interested in more affordable and accessible art info. I'm posting here as often as I can, and I'm hoping to get into some cool, bigger projects in the next few months. There will be an article summarizing this project over on janesawyermakes.com. Check it out, follow me on the socials, go make a house for a little guy, and I'll see you on the next one.